Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Arun Tiwari from Emirates Flight Catering. And on behalf of Microsoft and VMware, I can assure you, Mr. Tiwari, you will receive lunch today. So, ladies and gentlemen, our second speaker today is Mr. Gaurav Chand, who is the Executive Director, Datacenter Solutions Marketing and Business Development, Dell, Inc. So Gaurav Chand leads solutions marketing for the Dell's global public sector and large enterprise business. In this role, Gaurav is responsible for architecting the strategy, business development, and the go-to-market plans for the Dell's multi-billion-dollar enterprise solutions portfolio. Gaurav is going to be speaking under the entitlement of the virtual era is fluent. Ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome Mr. Gaurav Chand.
So thank you very much again for joining us here today. The first thing I just wanted to start off with is, Arun mentioned the supply chain side of Dell, and we carry inventory for about 2 hours. He's actually wrong. It's 1 hour, 56 minutes. So I thought I'd correct you. No, but just kidding. I thought it was a smart way to start by basically telling a customer he was wrong. It's the best way to start a presentation. What I'm here to talk about is I'm not here to talk about cloud, so that's good news, at least for Arun. That's good news. What I'm here to talk about, honestly, is something I think that's more messed up than cloud at this point in time, which is this whole notion of data management. Let me tell you why it's messed up. Let me ask the audience here. How many of you believe that in the next, say, 3 years, your storage capacity is going to pretty much double? How many people believe that? 100% of the room. Now, how many of you believe that your budgets, as a result of that, are going to double in the next 2 to 3 years? One hand. If that's not messed up, I don't know what is messed up, right? And that's one of the greatest challenges. And what I'm here to talk about, honestly, is this whole notion of being able to place data at the right time, at the right place, and eventually at the right cost, and actually taking value out of the data, and not just spending all of your time in pure storage management. So before I talk about data, just a couple of things to frame, and I apologize up front. I'm going to probably skip over some slides just because of time. So if you see me just hustling through, I'll be there for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, absolutely open to ask them. But you know, what we're seeing from a data perspective is actually true to the data center. Arun mentioned a couple of these things, but if you look at IT today, in a lot of cases, it is inflexible. It's difficult for an end user to understand why does it take so long to set up a data center? Why does it take so long to get an application up and running, right? The status quo, there's a lot of time involved in just maintaining your infrastructure today, as opposed to doing things which are a lot more innovative, right? Virtualization ceilings. Virtualization is good in case of a lot of customers, right? However, it's difficult to implement. How do you move from a test and dev to a production maintaining that virtualization? Do you trust it? Do you not, right? Can it actually come through for your mission critical organizations? The last thing, and Paul Bell touched upon this a little last night, it's this whole notion of CapEx versus OpEx, right? If you look at the last 10 years, it's actually a pretty positive trend, but it's not going fast enough. In the early 2000s, CapEx spending used to be somewhere close to 64%. Today, it's closer to 50%. In an ideal world, you just want to deal with variable expenses, pay as you grow, right? So those are some of the challenges. Now, you know, Dell's maintained this very strongly in terms of where should customers honestly be spending a lot of their money. And why I speak about this very confidently is I can talk about our own story. 5 years ago, we had a decision in front of us. Did we want to be a box provider, or do we want to be a true solutions company? To go to a true solutions company, you need IP. You need a lot of things that you don't have, right? So we basically started looking at IT very closely. Net, we saved about $2 billion over a year in IT. Where do you think that $2 billion has been spent? Think about the 15 acquisitions that we've made in the last 2 years. That's where that $2 billion that's been spent. We implemented a brand new Salesforce application at Dell, right? We got full marketing automation at Dell. All of those investments were highly strategic, highly solutions transformation oriented, as opposed to maintaining the status quo. And I think the question in front of a lot of you right now is the same one, right? How do you shift this paradigm from spending a lot of time on maintenance to actually repurposing your assets to talk about something more strategic? The storage world is honestly no different. I don't know, we did a lot of surveys on this. 17% of your hardware budget today, I mean, think about your entire infrastructure, think about networking, think about laptops and desktops, think about wireless, think about racks, think about power and consumption. In spite of all of that, 17% is spent on storage. If you look at storage utilization, look at the far right on that chart, Windows utilization is somewhere between 20 to 30% on Windows-based applications, which is honestly, think about the amount of money that's going to waste on that kind of utilization. Storage staff, a lot of your storage staff today is just completely drowned in just basic operations like provisioning and things like that, right? And finally, let's face it, this is not going to get any easier. This is only going to get worse. If you look at this chart, what it basically shows, one of the new and upcoming trends that's happening, and I don't know how many of you have seen this actually in your environments. You know, 10 to 20 years ago, it was all about your block applications. You had an Oracle, you had a SQL, you had an Exchange, and that was taking up most of your storage. Today, it's actually entirely reversed, and you know, 5 years from now, 4 years from now, it's going to get even worse. File is going to predominantly take over all of your storage needs. I'll give you an example. This presentation is about 11 MB. 11 MB presentation. How many times do you think this presentation is going to be accessed ever again? Well, data shows 90% of times this presentation is never going to be accessed again. So the question I have is, if this presentation is never going to be accessed even once again, why should it live on the most expensive medium of storage that you have, which might be fiber channel, right? Why should it live on that medium? Could it live on something a lot more inexpensive? And that's the whole notion of tiering, which we'll get to in a second. So my question for you guys is, what if there was a storage solution that could truly deliver savings both from a CapEx and an OpEx standpoint? Reduce that CapEx burden as much as you can and basically go on a pay-as-you-grow environment. What if it could leverage standard-based architectures and not lock you in every time? And finally, what if you could use that storage to actually get value out of the data as opposed to spend all of your time managing your data? I wanted to present Dell's point of view around storage, right? And I'll walk through these pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, what we believe at Dell is automation is absolutely key. And there's for CIOs, there's an immediate benefit around automation. Arun talked about, hey, we'll take care of everything else. You give us a lower cost. Well, you know, he also talked about how much it costs for an ERP administrator versus a network administrator. Think about all the SAN. For those of you who have SANs, think about how much it costs to hire and employ a SAN administrator versus a network administrator. I can tell you in the US at least, those numbers are staggering. A SAN administrator is anywhere close to 140,000 US dollars. A network administrator is anywhere close to 70,000 US dollars. Half, 70 to 80. We're talking about half the expense. Now, what if you could automate your storage to an extent that actually a network administrator could now manage your entire storage environment? It's a notion, think about it. Think about the cost savings and the whole repurposing you can do as a result of all of those savings. The second thing is this whole notion of forklift upgrades. That's one of the biggest challenges. As you guys are aware, I'll be upfront. Paul mentioned this a little yesterday. We had a long-standing relationship with one of the leading storage providers. And one of the things that we constantly try to work with them on, is the second bullet point, right? Is this whole notion. I mean, 10 years ago, if I spoke to a customer and talked about a server refresh, you know what they would tell me? Server refreshes happen every 3 years. Last week when I talked to a customer, you know what they say? It's 5 to 7 years. And storage is even more critical. There are customers who keep the same storage architectures for 5 to 10 years. What's the point of having forklift upgrades every 3 years in those kind of circumstances? And they're not going to change. If anything, they're going to get, those life cycles are going to get longer and longer, right? The third one is, I hear a lot of this all the time. iSCSI, fiber channel, you know, what's the right protocol? At the end of the day, the right protocol is, there is no right protocol. There's only a business application, and there is the notion that this business application should deliver a certain SLA for your end users, and that's what rides, you know, what protocol you use. So we're trying to get out of this whole world of, you know, what is the protocol? Because honestly, let's face it, the Ethernet is catching up. The Ethernet is on 10 gig today. But I'll challenge that notion, because if I was to go with an 8 gig fiber channel versus 10 gig Ethernet, I'll tell you the 10 gig Ethernet is going to be as expensive as 8 gig fiber today. But if you look at the future, Ethernet is promising 36 gigs within the next few years, right? When will it be production ready? Probably in 2020. It's a long time out. But you know, you're seeing all of these protocols moving, and at the end of the day, the way we view it is, it's the application that decides it. It's the SLA around the applications. Storage optimization, tiering is a really powerful concept. And back to the, when I talked about this presentation being 11 MB and being stored on expensive fiber channel disk and never accessed, it's a lot of money being spent in the wrong places, right? If you tier, you can potentially see huge amount of benefits in your storage management. And finally, this whole notion of get out of managing data, get into providing value and making decisions based on your data. So how does this Dell point of view actually transcend into our strategy, what we call a fluid data architecture or intelligent data management strategy, right? The first thing is automated data management. And I'll go a little into the technology piece and derive the customer benefit. If you look at what we can do with Compellent today, it's an incredible notion where imagine if you had data and automatically, you know, without any third-party software or anything to that effect, you could actually tell whether this data has been accessed never, once, or multiple times in the last 6 months. And then you could, in an automated fashion, move that data to the right level of storage. Think about the cost benefit. Here's a very quick comparison. Think about how much you pay for a 3 terabyte SATA drive versus a 600 GB fiber channel drive. A 600 GB fiber channel drive is a lot more expensive. If you can move information to SATA sooner, based on the SLA of that information, and do it in an automated fashion where you don't have to have that $140,000 SAN administrator going into it and doing it for you, you could potentially save a lot of money and repurpose that for some strategic project that you might or might not have going in your environment. All right? Optimize the storage footprint. We're going to talk about tiering just a little later, more in detail. Scale seamlessly. This whole notion that, you know what, as I scale, my capacity increases, but my efficiency goes down, and I don't get the same bang for the buck. That's rubbish. In all honesty, that's rubbish, right? If you look at EcoLogic today, you get the exact same capacity and the exact same I/O as you scale out your environment. So, you know, as your storage footprint increases and you're signing checks for that storage to be added, at least you're not running into I/O bottlenecks, which is what happens in a lot of cases, right? Let's talk about, you know, some of the acquisitions. The reason I bring this up is I constantly hear from customers, hey, you guys are going through the solutions transformation. Good for you. What does it do for us, right? And that's what I want to try to portray on this slide out here. EcoLogic was a company we bought about 3 years ago. When we bought it, the average revenues were about $100 million. Today, EcoLogic alone is over $1 billion. The reason it resonates is for the simple reason that customers love that automated, scale seamlessly kind of a model. Plus, think about the number of people in your environments that are absolutely familiar with the Ethernet today. And think about the number of people in your environments that are absolutely familiar with fiber channel today. If you have the right applications which requires a lower SLA, EqualLogic is a phenomenal option, right? You can even sparse out your applications. You have a high-end Oracle application running on a very high active database size. I'm not telling you to put that on EqualLogic. Don't. You have a non-mission critical exchange environment that you could save a lot moving to EqualLogic. That's how you think about it. Or think about all your file. Think about all your file environment. Move that to potentially something like EqualLogic, right? Because you can get huge savings from doing that. The next one is Compellent. I talked a little about Compellent. It's an amazing architecture. And if you have the chance, you know, speak to a Dell rep and get more details around Compellent, because the way it manages data for you is absolutely spectacular and absolutely unique. Nobody else can do it in the degree of automation that Compellent can do it. And it's fiber channel, right? So for those mission critical applications that you absolutely want because you trust fiber channel, whether it be security, whether it be IO, whether it be performance, that's a great medium out there. Exanet is a company we bought about a year ago. We looked at a lot of companies. And the one thing we realized from a company standpoint is you have some people who have a phenomenally fast file system, and you have some others who have really good storage management. And honestly, Exanet was the only company that we saw had a great blend of both. A super fast file system along with true storage management capabilities. And that's what you get with Exanet. And finally, Ocarina. I don't know honestly how many of you guys have heard of Ocarina, but I'm not going to tell you the Dell speak. I'll give you a customer example. Most of you guys are pretty familiar with Facebook, right? I don't know how many of you know, but Facebook today, the size of Facebook today is the size of the entire internet in 2004. That's a fact. Facebook is as large as the whole internet was in 2004. Well, Facebook had a major problem. Facebook file system was going berserk. There were so many people loading so much stuff on Facebook, they could not handle it. What their storage was giving them is a great file system. However, every time they expanded capacity, you know, there was a lot of unutilized space because they needed those nodes just for I/O. Came in Ocarina, which is a deduplication compression software, and we compressed Facebook's data, and we reduced Facebook's entire storage footprint by exactly 60%. So, in a world where they required about 150 petabytes of data, we shrank that down through compression to 75%. And all of that can be rehydrated, absolutely no issues, right? So from a regulatory standpoint, it's absolutely covered. So that's the beauty of Ocarina. Now, we don't have Ocarina today. We're going to launch it very early next year. So you're going to start hearing a lot more about Dell and Ocarina coming soon. I'm pretty tight on time here, so I'm going to run through this. The nice part is, you know, honestly, if I won't do this because I'll be embarrassed myself. But if I ask this whole group, right, how many of you truly believe Dell is a thought leader in storage? I'll probably have 2 hands, and there'll be 2 Dell people raising their hands. Well, we have 1 hand here. That's awesome, right? But you know, we're getting a lot of credit for all of the acquisition and the integration work that we've been doing. Klaus Egge, who's a big analyst, talked a lot about Dell storage. If you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant, what is really interesting is look where Dell is. And this is pre-Compellent acquisition. Look where Compellent is on the far right side from a visionary standpoint. Compellent is considered one of the most visionary technologies in the industry today. You combine Dell and Compellent together, which we are at this point in time, think about the power that it can bring to our customers. So the industry now is acknowledging the fact we've got to do a better job of communicating this. We've not done a great job of communicating it, and we're starting to do that, right? We're starting to communicate this stronger to our customers. I'll skip this slide. I'll quickly run through this one. What we have today is truly a virtualized scale-out storage. All the benefits you can think about from virtualization, better capacity utilization, all of that comes with you from EqualLogic and Compellent, right? The whole object-based archiving. I'll ask this question to a lot of you. How many of you people do archiving, right? And the reason I ask that, there's a couple of people who raised their hands. The reason I ask that is just purely from a cost dynamic standpoint. The cost to archive on the DX platform is approximately 50 cents a gigabyte. The cost to save all of that information on your primary storage, whether it be a SAN or SAS, fiber channel SAS, whatever it is closer to $2 a gigabyte. You're talking about 1/4 the cost. So what I'll ask you is, for information that's not been accessed for the last 90 days, do you seriously want it to live on fiber channel SANs? Or is archiving a better option? Now, when I say that, a lot of customers turn back and say, you know what? The biggest pain I have with archiving is the fact that it's next to impossible to get my data back. Or it takes days. In some cases, it takes weeks, right? Well, the one piece Dell is doing out into the future is the fact that we're trying to do seamless data migration between all of our tiers of storage. So you can literally go index a file in your archive and pull it back in seconds. Technology is not available today. We're working on it. It's going to come in the first half. But I'm also talking a little about futures. The other aspect of futures is the whole Ocarina discussion that I just had around compression and dedupe. The last thing I'll talk about is, I don't know how many of you have applications that require tier 0 storage, which is basically a very fast performing cache on your server. Our next generation of servers, which we launch in late February, are going to have tier 0 storage. So think about any mission critical, whether it be an Oracle app, whether it be an ERP app, SAP, whatever it is, that truly requires the horsepower from an I/O perspective. Now you're going to have tier 0 storage. And guess what? That tier 0 storage is going to fully talk to your back-end storage. So if you run into a disaster situation where you've got a ton of information in your tier 0 storage, right, that's going to seamlessly port over in case your lights went off and you didn't have a policy. That is going to seamlessly go back to your backend and save it, right? So we're trying to build technology that honestly talks across all the tiers and allows you to seamlessly migrate data between them. The final one, the cloud integration. We actually have a few models right now where customers take, 10,000 mailboxes and think about it this way. I have a 10,000 mailbox exchange environment today. That scales to 20,000 in the next 5 years. What if I could keep 10,000 mailboxes in my current infrastructure and take the next 10,000 and port it over the cloud? What if I could do that, right? What if I could preserve what I have today and use that technology? Because at the end of the day, what you don't want the cloud to work out is a rip and replace, because that makes no sense for you guys. You've invested money in certain technologies. You want that life cycle out of it. You don't want to rip and replace and go over the cloud. That's just that whole notion, unless you're working in an environment where you have absolutely unlimited budget, which I don't think anybody is, in all honesty, right? So that's our full story. I've got a couple of minutes. I'm going to end on basically this slide. And it's all, at the end of the day, it's all about figuring out what kind of data you have and where it is living. If you haven't gone through, how many of you have gone through a storage assessment recently? Just understanding where your data lives and what kind. We've got 2 or 3 people. We've got more actually. 10% of the audience. The power of actually doing that storage assessment is pretty amazing, because it's going to tell you exactly what data lies where, what's mission critical, what's not, what's being accessed, what's not, and how can you seamlessly migrate a lot of those data to much cheaper or more inexpensive mediums of storage. And that's a cost savings right there. I'm pretty much out of time. I'm sorry this presentation was a little rushed, but I wanted to leave the last 2-3 minutes in case anybody had any questions. No questions? Yeah, we've got one question there.
Can you able to listen to me?
Yep.
Yeah. We are already using EqualLogic storages. We have got, I think, 4 or 5 EqualLogic storage. Recently ordered one. For the users like us who are already on EqualLogic and using 10 gig Ethernet for configuring and connecting to our storage
Mhm.
with service. What is the need to go towards compellent?
Okay, question was simple. He's a customer, he's using EqualLogic storage today, he's got about 4 to 5 arrays, he just recently bought one. The ask was, what is the reason to go to compellent? And I'm going to be very honest and very transparent when I answer the question. Absolutely none, as long as EqualLogic can meet your SLAs. So if you're talking about applications that you've got 10 gig based on, if you've got the right folks in your environment who understand the Ethernet better than fiber channel, there is absolutely no reason to move to compellent, in all honesty, right? Now, you come across an application that has 70,000 mailboxes, like an Exchange environment, or a 10 gig active database size, then you've got to rethink that strategy and potentially look at something like compellent, just purely from an I/O standpoint, right? But if you don't have those applications and there's no reason to move, I'll be the first one to stand up here and say there is no reason to move to compellent. I'm not going to push compellent when your SLAs don't require it, in all honesty. What's cool about EqualLogic also is the fact that now we're going to get file and block on EqualLogic. So you're going to be able to manage a much larger environment in a much better fashion. Instead of having one of those, let me put this nicely, Windows servers that manage your file servers and give you a certain amount of NFS and CIFS performance. Now you're going to have Exanet fully integrated. And guess what? By the way, we're not going to rip and replace any of those EqualLogic systems. We'll just come and update the code, and you can actually manage your file and block. The other things we're doing around EqualLogic is replication. We're going to have synchronous replication very soon. So if you're looking at a mission-critical database that requires synchronous replication, as long as you have the I/O, and that's proving fine, you don't even have to move because of synchronous replication anymore.
Actually, I am from Ericsson. We have got managed service projects which get direct data from our users, like Vodafone, Reliance or something. We have our data, the user data, it increases quite fast actually. And as you said, the cost of storage is increasing day by day. So if I go towards compellent, as you were saying that archiving is, after doing archiving, we can access the data in case we need it. Is this better in compellent compared to EqualLogic?
So the whole archiving platform is actually not compellent, it's the DX6000. Now, what I will tell you compellent does give you, which EqualLogic does to a certain extent, but not as advanced and as automated from a compellent standpoint, is that whole automation on the data side. So, for example, you say your end users needs are increasing. These are files for the most that are being created. These files might or might not be accessed at a regular basis. If you want a storage platform that can look in a very automated fashion without any additional third-party software, if you want a storage platform that can look at all of that data, assess it on the fly, and then move it, right? Compellent is a great way to do it. But I'll be honest with you, right? You're going to have a couple of choices here. You can either rip and replace and go to compellent, which is probably not going to work out great, especially if EqualLogic is working phenomenally for you guys. Or what you could look at is once we launch something like Ocarina, you could actually dedupe at source. So that expanding environment, you can control that right at your primary storage level. We're going to have Ocarina built in on primary storage. So if you want, you can do one of two things. You can dedupe at source, so when the data is coming in, it's doing all of its matches. I mean, it checks things like, if I have two photographs and the color of the eyes in those two photographs is the same brown, it's going to store that once. If I have a file, a video, right, and if the movements or the jacket color of that person is the same color of black, it's going to store that just once. You can actually put Ocarina and then shrink your data from that perspective. If you truly have a massive expanding need that's going to consistently grow, and you have some intense regulatory requirements around, not being able to compress or dedupe data, then yes, compellent is a potential option for you. But like I said, I'm not going to try to push one over the other. At the end of the day, there are different ways to going about doing it. Just look at the SLA of your application. If you need an unbelievable amount of I/O, Compellent's probably a better option, honestly.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah, we've got one person back there.
My name is Puneet. So Ecologic and Compellent, these has been in market for quite a number of years.
Yep.
Prior to Dell's acquisition, these were not dominant players in the market.
Yep.
And now suddenly you're saying that good, when it comes to IP SAN, Ecologic is a dominant player there. They have good percentage of market share. So is it that the product has gone through a drastic architectural change, or Dell has been able to leverage its existing customers, or marketing strategy has been great that has been able to penetrate significantly?
That's a great question. So question was, Ecologic and Compellent have been in the market for a long time. What's so special about them now, right? Why are we pushing them really hard right now, and why are we saying that the next generation of storage? The answer is honestly very simple. I would love to stand here and say Dell put some amazing magic pixie dust over it and they suddenly became phenomenal systems. But the honest truth is the reason we acquired them was they were phenomenal systems to start off with, right? And architecturally, Dell, the only thing Dell has brought into the mix is the integration element. That's the only thing. The reason why you didn't hear about them, because they were small companies, right? I mean, literally, one of them had a field force of less than 400 people. With 400 people, there's only so much noise you can make to the market. You put Dell's presence, which is a $60 billion company, behind something like that, you can make a ton more noise around that. I mean, and it's honestly true with a lot of technology. Look at left-hand networks. How many people knew about left-hand networks before HP acquired them? Look at 3PAR. 3PAR was a little better known, but if I go globally and go to pretty much every country, not a lot of people knew about 3PAR before HP paid whatever they paid for it, right? So a lot of this for these companies is just a higher medium of being able to talk. Now, Dell has absolutely added a lot of value. I'll give you an example. We have an incredibly strong relationship with VMware. For a lot of you guys who might or might not be virtualized, think about it. For a customer who's, say, 30 to 40% virtualized, where do you spend most of your time from a console perspective? Where do your administrators spend most of their time? Probably VMware and the vCenter console. Now, what if I could provision storage from vCenter? Instead of having a separate person to manage the systems management portion of my storage, what if I could take the same guys who are managing vCenter and now start provisioning storage for me? That's the value Dell brings into play, right? We've been able to fully integrate Ecologic, Compellent from a vCenter management standpoint, so now one person can actually manage. So that whole integration of the infrastructure, that's where Dell's $60 billion backbone comes into play for these guys, honestly. All right, I think we're pretty much out of time. Thank you so much. And again, I'm going to be around all day, so if you have any questions, please feel free to approach me and ask me. Thank you.